everybody, welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we talk about the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, creator of Out of Frame and the creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education. And with me, as always, is our social media director, Paul Nelson, and director of communications for the Libertas Institute. I always say that wrong.
Everyone does.
How do you say it?
Libertas.
Libertas?
Not
Yes.
Libertas, which I want to say.
Literally everybody wants to say Libertas because that's...
Connor's being cutesy
Yeah.
about it. Anyway, in Utah, but Jen is fortunately still here with us in person.
I am.
For another month and a half.
Thereabouts.
Let's hope. Yeah, about
Thereabouts.
that. I'm super excited to have you here and be back in the studio. We've been out for a couple weeks, and I think week one out of the studio went pretty well, and then I think week two had some delays and some awkwardness, but hopefully that, will sort itself out.
The awkwardness
Yes.
now is just normal.
Yeah, just perfectly,
This is just bog standard awkwardness for us.
perfectly normal awkwardness. So how are you guys doing?
I'm doing
Been a good
well.
week?
Staying busy.
Very busy.
So much going on.
Have you bought a
So
zoo
much going on.
or a house?
I already had a zoo.
Yeah.
It's just thing one and thing two. But no, we have not bought a house. In fact, I haven't told you guys this yet. But
Because your husband was visiting Utah.
yes, he was.
Take a look.
And it's a good thing he did because we've decided that we're no longer going to be buying that house.
Oh no, what happened?
It's just not what we wanted it to be. There was a bunch of little things wrong with the house. And it just didn't. Negotiations fell through.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
Well, back.
didn't work out. So we're back
it.
on the hunt.
Yeah, house buying is tough. For those, I don't know that many people know, but like I didn't really expect to be a homeowner for probably a lot longer than actually became a homeowner a few years ago. And but I went to school in New York, and then I was living in New York and living in LA and then living in DC, and like none of those places as an artist of any kind.
We'll get to DC.
Yeah, DC. We will get to DC in a minute, but like that just didn't really seem in the cards for the most part. I mean, even some of my friends who are the most successful people I know in LA, to give a shout out to like Austin Wintory, who's going to be, on our Entrepreneur Week event. Well, it actually already was at this point. By the time this comes out, he will have already been. So actually, you guys should go check out that on YouTube whenever it comes out. But, Austin's a really, really successful composer. And still, like Austin and I talk about home ownership stuff all the time. And he's like, it doesn't make any sense in LA. I mean, it's not only that like it would be expensive, it's also like just the economics of it is just kind of backwards.
Yeah.
Because why blow, $3 million if, and whatever the mortgage is for that when you could pay rent, dramatically cheaper than that. It's very weird. But yeah, becoming a homeowner was cool, but it's also like attendant to a lot of other challenges.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's a big headache, and it is not the kind of online shopping experience that is at all enjoyable. So
Yeah, you definitely have to try it on.
yeah.
So. Well, my wife and I really want to build a house, and we've been talking about that for a little while. But that seems like it's going to be an even bigger nightmare in a lot of ways.
It's its own kind of headache, for sure.
I don't know. That's going to be like a 2 or 3 year long project. It's not going to be like a next year kind of situation, I think. But I have some big news. World's Strongest Man is happening right now as we are recording this, in any case. They do it kind of weird, actually. I think they don't normally post. They're actually going to post results this year. They don't normally do that. They normally wait until the televised version. But the televised version won't happen for a few weeks.
Yeah.
In a world of social media, I don't know how you would avoid that. But it'll be on CBS in a couple weeks, and then it'll also be on the BBC, well, on Channel 5, I should say, not BBC. in a couple weeks, and but we're actually trying to watch like various live streams and stuff now. They're not showing the events. We're not getting to actually see any of the action, but we're seeing like recaps and things like that. But the big thing is that they always do it they typically do it outside, and they're in Bradenton, Florida, and hurricane is happening right now. So the first day was supposed to be yesterday. It was the first day of actual competition. It was supposed to be yesterday. And that got completely rained out. And what that means, though, is that they've lost their rest day in between the heats and the finals. It is going to be so brutal. And so the other thing, and I was telling Jen about this before we started this, thing that makes it even more brutal is that the end of the heats. So if you're the winner of the heat, you just go straight through to the finals. But if you're second and third place in the heats, you have to do a last man standing Atlas stone battle. So basically, one guy picks up the stone, drops it over the other side. The guy on the other side picks it up, drops it over, and they just go back and forth until they're done. Last year, it was Alexei Novikov and Trey, I'm forgetting his last name, went 14 or 15 rounds of this on a 300-plus pound stone. Now, no break.
Yeah.
Right? Do that, get to second place in your heat, get through to the final, and then, oh, by the way, there's no rest day.
So definitely win your heat.
Win it. Definitely win it.
Win it.
So I'm excited about it. It's the first time I've ever been excited about sports. But the other thing we were talking about with sports, which is so rare for me, is now this one's going to be an even wilder move, is golf.
Golf.
Because the Masters is happening
in the fall for the first time.
I have no idea. I have no context
and
for golf.
You're wearing a very appropriate shade of green for that.
A very Masters green.
You know, I thought I'd class it up a little bit today. Just bring a little bit of that Masters.
Well, someone's got to do it.
But the only thing I cared about is just because it got passed around on social media was a guy, and I don't even know who it was, who I don't know if you'd call it chipped. I'm not really sure if it's a chip.
Topped it and was be able to skip the ball.
Basically,
across
yeah, skip the ball across like a water hazard of some kind, like a little pond, and then rolled around on the green, up like a little hill, came back down, sank straight in the hole, which was just a one in a lifetime sort of shot. Like I can't imagine anyone ever doing that again.
No, these guys are ridiculously good, and can do pretty much whatever they want. But that's just so lucky.
Yeah, I don't. But that's the intersection of like wildly talented plus like insane luck,
right?
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
Oof.
Golf is one of those sports that it's hard to appreciate on television, and you can, but just especially the Masters because the course is so hilly, a lot of undulations. Sure.
Up and downs.
Yeah, so
hills.
There's hills. I don't have my Jim Nance voice on today, but it's impressive. And playing golf very poorly myself.
Yeah, I don't. Not at all. Mini golf, as we discussed, but
no, I'm very good at mini golf.
Literally nothing else.
Yeah, real golf, no.
I
love playing real golf, but I get my money's worth at the amount of strokes I use to get around 18 holes, but
probably the time you spend out there.
Yeah, and also the beer cart. I get my money worth.
That feels like what golf is to me. Is a quote unquote sport where it's mostly just walking and drinking beer. Feels like the
quote unquote sport. No, it's a sport
for people playing the Masters. Sure.
Yeah.
For somebody like me, it 100% would not be.
It is very erudite day drinking.
That's exactly what it would be. I can't imagine it'd be anything else at that point.
Yeah.
But the same thing with like attending baseball games. Like I don't care about the baseball game.
You're just there for Thirsty Thursdays.
It's totally irrelevant. Hot dogs
and beer.
Hanging out with people. Yeah, that would be literally it.
Yeah.
That'd be the whole point. But on the, I don't know if this is a segue or not. I don't think it is. But on the subject of the intersection of wildly outsized talent and just dumb luck, we're going to talk about The Rock today. I don't know if that segue works.
No.
I'm going to go with it, though, because The Rock is a movie. Once again, Paul has never seen this movie, so we're going to put the spotlight on Paul again. Now, I saw this movie probably when it came out, I was 13, and I probably saw it like when it was on VHS.
This came out in 96?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I turned 12 that year.
probably
6.
I'm going to go with I probably saw it when it came out on VHS. I definitely didn't see it in the theaters, but I would say like a year later. So I was probably 14 years old when I first saw this movie, and I've rewatched it a dozen times since, probably way more than that. And every time I watch it, I am reminded that it is amazing. And it's dumb. It's an incredibly dumb movie in a lot of ways. But there are things that it does that are perfectly set up. All the characters are really well developed. I know who everybody is. I know what all their motivations are. I know why they're in the positions that they're in, doing the things that they're doing. I know how all the action is laid out. I know what the purpose of various plot beats are. Everything about the story of the movie is crystal clear the entire way through, and everything else about it is wildly over the top and implausible. And that, to me, like it is a quintessential Michael Bay movie before Michael Bay got sort of unintelligible. And great Zimmer score, very Jerry Bruckheimer, explosions everywhere. Like everything about this movie is just peak 90s action. I mean, and I think even like speaking of Michael Bay, like I think this is even above stuff like Bad Boys. Like I think it's over and beyond all of that. The stakes are higher. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes the Bad Boys stuff is like the stakes get to be like world, saving the world kind of stakes for no good reason. I feel like for a couple
That's always hard
cops,
for me.
but still,
Will Smith is
yeah,
the best.
But the reason we want to talk about The Rock, Sean Connery.
Yeah.
The sad bit, of course, that Sean Connery just died, 90 years old. Obviously, he'd been retired for close to a decade at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think. So, I mean, we all kind of expected at some point in the near future. But, we wanted to take a minute and do a little bit of a retrospective on Connery. And so we might venture away from The Rock a little bit. And then on our Patreon bonus, after the main show is over, we're going to talk about the very first James Bond movie, Dr. No, Connery's, entry into the James Bond world. But before we get to that, let's talk about The Rock. Paul, it's your first time. How have you first of all, how did you avoid? I get you were 6 or whatever when it came out, but how did you miss it in college? Or I'm just shocked that you didn't have like movie nights where people were like, "Hey, man, no, we gotta watch this."
My college time, I was busy. I played college football. I didn't have a lot of downtime.
Oh, fair.
So
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah, between that and my rigorous course load.
He couldn't get it out.
Yeah, for
It's
those
great.
just listening, I didn't mean to laugh inherently at Paul's rigorous course load comment, but just the face that he was making immediately.
Heavy sarcasm.
Heavy sarcasm.
Yeah. But it just never happened. But this movie is a perfect for the dying cable movie. If it's on, no matter what point of the movie it's on, you can just sit down, exactly what's coming next. I did enjoy this. It
is a tremendously quotable movie.
It is very quotable. Not necessarily on this show.
No, there are a lot of things that we cannot say on this show.
There's a lot of questions I have about choices.
Okay.
About the cast, mainly.
I'm intrigued by that too, because I generally like the cast. Nicolas Cage is obviously the wild card here a little bit.
Why? This makes no sense.
Because it's 1996 and Con Air and Face
No,
Off and
This was
peak action star
Nick Cage.
Nick Cage,
Yeah.
But his acting style works for like a national treasure, where you have to be a little off to believe those crazy. But this is just he's just saying ridiculous stuff, and it's supposed to be this desk jockey FBI agent that's a nerd, and he's just, wait, what?
So I said, and I stand by this, that everybody's character is really, really clear. And they are. And Nick Cage's character is even really, really clear. But to your point, I will give you that his character, even though it is crystal clear exactly who he is, I mean, honestly, like even from like what they're, like the little games that they're playing, when you're first introduced to Nick Cage's character, this guy named Stanley Goodspeed, FBI agent, chemical specialist, you know, he's in a laboratory, but he's not like a laboratory nerd, even in there. He's unwrapping a Beatles LP. He's a Beatles fan.
He's pretentious.
He's kind of pretentious, but he's playing games. And
sounds better.
Just sounds better.
Get off.
This is mid '90s. CDs were just starting to be
hipster glasses.
A big push. Well, that's the sad thing, is that there's still hipsters now who are like, it sounds better. Where you're like
you're just wrong.
That's just not true anymore. But
false. But
fine,
all right,
whatever. Yeah, we'll get comments and hate for saying 100%. That too, but oh my God, I got to go on a slight tangent for this. Sorry. There's a company called Pear that makes audio cables. This is a wild tangent here, guys. Apologies. But so another person who died recently is James Randi, who's also, how old was he? Over 90. He was
very old.
Very, very
if you haven't ever seen the documentary An Honest Liar,
it was wonderful.
You probably should. It's about James Randi, and it's outstanding.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I'm going to try to make this quick, but James Randi was a really brilliant magician. He's a very old guy now, but he invented a lot of tricks. He was a great escape artist. But the main thing that he became known for was the James Randi Educational Foundation, which essentially investigated and challenged claims of the paranormal and claims of, sort of supernatural things that were happening. And one of the reasons he did that was because he was seeing in the 70s, 80s, 90s, he was seeing academics actually get taken in by charlatans, basically, people who would claim that they could do things like Uri Geller and spoon bending and all of that kind of nonsense. And he then tried to offer his services to academics, saying, well, I'm a magician, I'm very skilled at this, I can tell you exactly how this was done. And he got rejected by a lot of the professors he went to go speak with. They were not interested in hearing from an uneducated, non-PhD.
That's kind of on brand for college professors.
It is on brand.
And it's also...
I'm going to be wrong, and I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah. Well, and so what he ended up doing actually was probably the first iteration of like what the Sokol squared stuff that ended up happening later, which was like... Sokol was about like sort of faking papers and bringing it in. But what Randi did was he trained some apprentices and he got them into some paranormal studies. And they just went through the ringer on these academics. They were like doing spoon bending and mentalism and all of these different tricks. And the college professors were just eating it up. They were like, oh my God, these guys have supernatural powers. It's amazing. Yeah.
It's just like how they eat up socialism. It works.
Tragically. But
it's all about that magical thinking.
It is a lot of magical. Anyway, they revealed themselves and whatever. But Randi, so going back my way, retracing my steps through this tangent, I mentioned Pear audio cables. Pear made claims that they make ludicrously expensive cables, like $1,500 pairs of cables.
Oh, this is I've okay.
And so the James Randi Educational Foundation has a $1 million prize for anyone who can verify in a controlled test environment a supernatural paranormal claim. And they actually offered that prize to the Pear Cable Company because they made claims about, like they had audio engineers who were making claims that they could hear the difference between a gold-plated like monster cable for $40 to their like $1,500 cables, and they never took them up on that.
Wonder why?
That testing offer. Anyway, going back through that. Sorry, I had to go down that little rabbit hole of tangents. But, all right. Anyway, and we got there from him being a hi-fi freak.
Right.
Yeah.
So back to
Beatles LP.
Beatles LP. Back to Nicolas Cage for a minute. His character doesn't his character is not what you would expect for a laboratory nerd FBI agent. But he is a clear character.
Yes, his motivations are very clear. Not like everyone's motivations are, and I very much appreciate it.
He's also like kind of a weirdo just all the time.
I think what my issue
plays guitar when he gets home.
There's gosh, just one of those people. You know what? You like what you like. I like what I like. Yeah, you have fun.
I'm not saying you have to hang out with Stanley Goodspeed,
but I
probably wouldn't want to.
Actually. I think the character would have been better served with more of a
nerd.
No, maybe not necessarily a nerd, just somebody that's not spouting off ridiculous things that we cannot say in the heat of some moments, and it just didn't.
Whoa, marriage police pull over.
That was so terrible.
I can say that. He's goofy. He's a goofy character.
Because every other casting decision, spot on. Ed Harris as the villain.
So great.
If there was a remake of The Rock where it was just focused on him and it showed nothing else, it would be tremendous.
Yeah.
But I feel like the pitch for this was like, let's just do James Bond, but he's old and in prison.
Well, all right. So actually, we got to back up because I haven't actually explained the plot. I figure everybody's seen this movie, which is maybe why. Very simply put, a group of, we'll call them ex-Marines in this case, treasonous soldiers at this point, are protesting government abuses, mostly that they've been doing Ed Harris's issue is that he had been the commander of a number of special ops missions for which he had men died. He said 82, I want to say.
Illegal
special ops missions. We'll definitely talk about that in a second. And that his guys not only never got buried, even they just left in Afghanistan or wherever, Iraq.
Families lied to.
And families are lied to and everything else, and not compensated. And so his issue is really just the mistreatment of the soldiers, but which I love, by the way. I think one of the most really, and I mean this with no irony at all, I think one of the most brilliant aspects of this movie is that the first 8 minutes are dedicated to Ed Harris.
Yeah.
And getting to know Ed Harris's character and why he is motivated to do this is set up so well that everything that Ed Harris does from that point on, I'm like,
makes sense.
I get it. I understand. I know what you're doing. I know why you're doing it, and it matters. But what he does is he takes over the Rock, Alcatraz prison, when they're on a tour, and he brings some rockets with some terrible nerve gas, and basically takes all these hostages and then threatens the city of San Francisco in order to try to extort money from the government to pay the families of these fallen soldiers and stuff. Again, his motivations are just spot on. Like I completely get exactly what he's doing, what he's trying to do. And then the rest of the movie is chemical weapons specialist, which you need. You got to disarm this nerve gas missile, and a former SAS operative played by Sean Connery, who was the only guy. Nobody's supposed to know this, but he was the only guy who had ever escaped Alcatraz. So they need him to get back in. They need Stanley to disarm the bomb. Perfect. Like that's set up. Like there's nothing in there. Like it all makes perfect sense. But I do think there's a strong sort of conspiracy theory kind of case to be made that this is Bond. That his character, that the John Mason character that Connery plays, is just James Bond.
They definitely winked and nodded at it.
Oh, yeah.
I'd buy that.
I would 100% buy it. And also, you buy it even more if you think of 007 as a call sign that different people have taken over at some point.
There's been fan theories floating around that James Bond, the name James Bond, is not a name. It's just a pseudonym for this
agent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Which would make sense.
Yeah.
You could do that for sure. But that's what I mean. Like you could take, somewhere in the, I don't know, when was Connery's last Bond? Still in the 60s, I think?
I think it was
late 60s.
late 60s.
So it scans, right? Sean Connery, SAS agent, disappears in the late 60s, gets black bag, put in prison, illegally also, extrajudicially put in prison, and left to rot.
Which is a fancy way of saying kidnapped.
Yeah, it is a fancy way of saying kidnapped. It's funny how that works.
Just gonna throw that one out there.
Yeah, let's talk about that. But anyway, kind of interesting.
That's definitely what the pitch. We got Sean Connery on board. He's just Bond. We can't call him that, but and he helps us save the day.
And you kind of don't need to call him that,
right?
Because you'd be
Everyone knows that's the only way this movie works.
It's a huge part of how this works for sure, and also just the fact that when he gets out of prison, when he's sort of released to help with this mission, his first move is to go get a suit and a haircut.
Yep.
First move is to
at a nice hotel.
At a nice hotel to get dapper and get dressed up again, look nice, It's very Bond.
It is very Bond.
But that's what's great about it, honestly. It's what makes the whole thing super fun to me. It's like you have Bond. You've got peak action star Nicolas Cage being a lunatic. You've got Ed Harris being a menacing villain. You got some character actors even, I mentioned Tony Todd earlier, who's one of the mercenary guys, and they're just like you said. I think everybody is perfectly cast for all of those roles. All of the John C. McGinley and all of the other Marines that he's with, just top notch people.
Also, I think was one of the Marines, terrorist Marines. I saw he had a top knot. Is that the first top knot on screen?
I do not recall.
Mid-90s. That's
mid-90s.
Early.
That is early. Is that? I don't think that's.
Wait, are we talking about a man bun?
Yes, more or less.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall.
I saw that. I'm like, wow, mid-90s. Who knew?
Why not? I don't know if that's standard. If that's regulation.
I don't think so.
I'm going to say no, but then most of
they are
what they were doing was not regulations.
It does seem like they are a little bit outside the lines on this one. So.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. I think this is something that I've wanted to do on the show a little bit more, and I think we've not always been super great at it. I'd like to talk more about this sort of underlying issues of what's kind of going on here. And I think the one that we really wanted to hone in on with The Rock is actually Ed Harris's point. And I think there's a couple layers to that, right? There is the illegal war aspect of it, the sending soldiers into other countries to manipulate elections, or just to take out criminal elements or terrorists or whatever, without actually going through any of the proper channels or declaring war or doing any of those kinds of things. So there's that aspect of it, which I think is the big overarching issue on top of everything. But then there's also Ed Harris's proximal issue of just mistreatment of veterans,
Yes.
and not, which is a huge issue all by itself, even without the, extrajudicial killing part of it, And then of course there's the John Mason being imprisoned without trial for a good long time.
Yes, because he knows who killed JFK.
Because he knows who killed JFK. We can't avoid a little conspiracy theory.
Yeah. What's so interesting for me is that you take out the conspiracy theory, you take out the illegal operations, which may or may not. We assume they happen. I know you guys are. I'm the resident neocon on the panel.
Fair.
So,
but yeah,
sometimes you got to use the stick.
I'm not so I'm not fully opposed to that in the sense that I don't think it's reasonable to assume that we would ever live in a world without some of that kind of thing happening. That said, I do think it is reasonable to expect your government not to do it clandestinely, illegally, covering things up. All of those kinds of things are pretty bad. If I just often feel like if you are going to do something like that, the fact that you can't get, either international support, you can, if you're going to go into somebody else's country, maybe you should ask them first, or actually have a declaration of war. This public, and again, some of these specific operations, My dad was a colonel in the Air Force and Air National Guard, but also the commanding officer of the Kandahar Air Force Base in 2003, and he didn't talk about a lot of that, And there's a lot of stuff that I know he can't talk about. I do know he used to tell me that the special ops guys, he always thought the special ops guys were kind of, I think he had a lot of respect for him, but I think he thought they were always kind of funny because they didn't report to him.
Yeah.
He's the CO of the base, and all they would do is they would show up and get a shower and shave and get some food, and they would just go right back out and do whatever it is that they do.
Lord knows what.
And so I don't think my dad had a lot of knowledge. I mean, he may have known.
Yeah.
He obviously has clearance and stuff, but
Yeah.
The special ops guys are just off in their own world. Just going
that's
stuff.
I mean, when you have a government as big as ours, people do things without the other hand knowing, and that happens all the time.
Yeah.
But take all of that out, just the documented mistreatment of our veterans.
Yeah.
And that is something that I get real emotional about.
I think there's so many things about this issue to me that are super important. First of all, suicide is a big deal to me. Mental health is a big deal to me. I think just the veteran suicide rates are extraordinary and shocking. And a lot of that's really, really easy to understand because you're asking people to do something that is psychologically extremely damaging. Mm-hmm. And then you have very, very little support on the other side. There's very little help for anybody who's coming back. I mean, I think a little bit about Chris Kyle's story and American Sniper and stuff like that, which that movie is a great movie, and maybe we should do an episode on that at some point too. But what's really good about the film and what's interesting about the story is just that you could see a broken human being. Just he killed so many people. Coming back to go to the movies and go to the grocery store or whatever. It's just not tenable. It's not a normal thing to do at that point. The other thing I want to talk about too is the VA, because people talk about the VA like it's it's so bizarre to me because it is notoriously terrible.
It is garbage.
And yet when Trump went to get COVID treatment, I got a ton of people on my feed going, well, he's getting the best healthcare at the VA.
At Walter Reed.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
No, that's insane.
I mean, maybe Trump did.
Maybe Trump did, but not because of the VA.
Literally everybody else at that hospital.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. I mean, the waiting lists are forever. People will go years for treatment, for physical therapy, for all kinds of stuff.
So
it's just nuts.
I'm from Southwest Kansas, so the Dodge City. That's where I'm. So we have veterans who previously before there's some legislation passed, but previously before for years they had to travel 3 hours at least to get to the closest VA hospital.
Yeah,
and most of the time they were told, well, we can't do anything about it.
Yeah,
so you have to
get on a waiting list.
So then you have to miss work, waste money, and you don't even get the care that you need. And makes all this worse is that we have a volunteer army.
Yeah.
And we can't even take care of them, and then we expect socialized medicine to take care of everyone else.
That's the most bizarre aspect of it. It is the one. I mean, we can talk about Medicare and Medicaid and stuff like that, where it is state paid primarily healthcare, and then there are a handful of state run hospitals and things. But the VA is 100% government run.
Yep.
That is what it is.
It's for a very small
and it's for a very tiny percentage of the population, and it is terrible.
I wrote an article about this not too terribly long ago. I think must have been last year, talking about specifically the VA and also healthcare on Indian reservations in the United States.
Yeah.
And how both of those things are 100% government run and managed and executed and funded, and they are horrific. And these are two distinct populations that have been through the absolute ringer because of the federal government, okay? Veterans and Native Americans. And we can't even take care of these two
and again,
tiny,
they're very small
populations.
Parts of the population.
That nobody disagrees that we should be helping.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That, like everybody's fully in agreement.
The Native American stuff.
It makes me very
It makes me
angry.
super angry too. So there's another little facet of my weird upbringing, but my dad's a Native American art collector, just as a hobbyist, and he's been for my entire life. We've always had big pieces from different cultures like hanging in the house and stuff. Now my dad has like a whole cabinet and stuff hanging all over the walls, and a lot of it's really regionally specific. Not all of it, because he has a lot of Pueblo stuff too, and we never lived in the Southwest, but he's got a lot of Chinook and like Northwest Indian stuff because we lived in Portland area, and then we've got a lot of Plains Indian stuff. So Lakota, Sioux and Pawnee and Odo and things like that. And so I actually learned a lot about that kind of thing growing up, and the thing that drives me the most nuts about the way that we talk about Native American stuff is that the message that I was told and taught in school was that Indian reservations were autonomous. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Lies.
They are completely dominated by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, inside the Bureau of Land Management. The federal government controls every aspect of what they're allowed to do, what activities they're allowed to do on the reservation. What they can own, property rights, and
education, healthcare.
Awful in every conceivable way. And the problem is then you have these weird stereotypes at the same time. You're like, well, it's just casinos and drunk Indians. The reason that it's casinos is because it's the only type of activity that is legally allowable to do.
Yeah.
And that is not because some, community of tribal elders has decided that we're going to have casinos. It's because the federal government will not allow actual property rights. It's bonkers. These things, when you actually look at what the reality of those systems are, again, going back to the VA and healthcare, everything like that, they are so bad, and yet we act as if they're things that we want to expand and bring to everybody. Yeah, I don't get it. I really don't get it. But again, going back to The Rock, it's why for me Ed Harris's character is actually such a great villain.
Yeah,
because this is, and I talked about this on the Thanos episode too. But a great villain. First of all, a great villain is crazy important to a good story. Mm-hmm. But a great villain should have a believable... Plausible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or an argument. Right?
Nobody...
Thanos, I hate because Thanos is wrong about everything.
Right.
But he's operating on an argument I've seen.
He's crazy enough
everywhere.
to believe his stupidity.
He definitely believes it. And I've met, hundreds of people in the real world to believe his argument.
Yep.
Many, many hundreds after I put out that video because I got gazillions of comments. People,
oh, man.
Oh, no, overpopulation.
So many people were big mad about that.
Yeah, so they're wrong. But
they're
fine.
100% incorrect.
But that's also what made Thanos such a great villain.
Yeah.
Because he has an argument. I understand what his argument is. Same thing with Killmonger, I think, in Black Panther. It was man, you're wrong, but I understand why you believe that. And Ed Harris, same deal. And Ed Harris is not even wrong.
No,
he's actually right, but his
methodology. Yeah. The core motivation needs to be at least kind of relatable to the average person to have a really good villain.
Yeah.
And
otherwise you're just
evil. You're just the evil overlord.
Yeah.
You're the
Dr. No.
Yeah.
Well, he does have.
He has a little bit.
He's
mad because he didn't get a job.
He wants to get that cash, and nobody gave it to him.
Fair.
We'll get into that later.
Get to that in a second.
But you need to be able to relate to a villain
Yeah.
Like an audience needs
Yeah.
to relate to a villain, just as much as they need to relate to a hero. It's just that they just the thing to me
Yeah.
that makes the best kind of villains
actually
is
think
like
it's-
I'm on board with why you're mad.
Yeah. But you're wrong.
But you're wrong about
Yeah.
how you're doing this.
I would argue it's actually even more important than the hero.
Yeah.
I think for a really great story, I think it is actually more important. I think there are some very, very good stories. I mean, Star Wars sort of falls into this category for me. Like the villains of Star Wars are thin. Like there's not really any.
Oh,
They are
super thin.
They are iconic though.
They're iconic. That I think is what makes up for it.
Yeah.
Is that there are aspects of like Darth Vader especially, but also Emperor Palpatine. You just go, this is an
Evil.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's pure evil. There's
Yeah.
no mentality behind
No.
it, but it's pure evil. But also, it is iconic,
Yeah.
and so you can kind of get away with that. But you know, when you don't have a really strong villain, most stories, because they don't have an iconic, you know, they don't make up for it with
Yeah.
you know, the epicness and the interesting aspects
Yeah.
of it and just the character design and everything else. But yeah, I think it's even more important because I think having somebody, you know, anybody could be a hero theoretically, you know, but you have to have a
Yeah.
very specifically good motivation for a villain.
If you have a good
Yeah.
villain, you could always put yourself into the hero's shoes,
Yeah.
and you don't really need the backstory to
Yeah.
fill in for a hero if you are just, you know what, I don't believe what Thanos is doing, so of course I would be like Captain America and
Yeah.
fight back. Of course I would be like
Not as good,
Nicolas Cage.
but Nicolas Cage. Of course, I would be like Nicolas Cage.
So what I also found interesting was that when Ed Harris calls in his threat, everyone's like, "Oh, this is bad," but nobody argued with him about the facts. They were like, "Oh yeah,
Well, nobody in the
Well,
This
it's a
happened.
fair cop.
in the war room, everybody kind of looks at each other like, well, you know.
who yeah, it happened."
It's
You got
the
me.
one guy at the beginning. So Hummel's on some kind of comm system. I don't know how he had video, by the way. How did he have?
They had
Zoom.
mini cameras.
That's amazing. Anyway, he was,
Zoom call.
in 1996. He was Zoom calling with the Pentagon, basically, and the Joint Chiefs, and some like 30, 35-year-old, 33, whatever the guy said he was. He was like, some guy was like, what are you talking about? We never had troops and whatever. And he was like, son.
He's like, sit down. The grown-ups are talking.
And it was like, but everybody else around the room was like, well, you know, maybe.
Which kind of is, you know, we do not negotiate with terrorists, but
Except for when we do.
We do it a lot,
but
actually.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, he's not asking for a lot of money.
He's
This is
not.
kind of a
Yeah.
rounding error.
Was that $100 million, I think, total?
82.
No, because
was
he
it-
had the additional
He did-
that he
Yeah.
would disperse at his
You just put-
discretion.
you
Because he
just-
had to pay
he had to pay his
his
guys.
Marines.
You just
his team.
put that under. We got to buy some pencils,
yeah.
and we're
Yeah,
fine.
like
Some
that
hammers.
is.
Let's
Yeah.
be real.
Some very
The-
specialized hammers.
The
Specialized
Pentagon
hammers.
lost more than that yesterday. Like,
Toilet
come on.
seats.
We all know it.
And it's gone.
Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah.
Just pay the
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, I just was like, well, we're gonna scramble all these jets. We're gonna blow up Alcatraz. Just give them the money.
Yeah, that is actually a really good point because the operation of like a squadron of F-16s definitely
I just don't.
Like,
get-
that
definitely that
costs
alone
more.
probably $50 million just there.
And then you
especially
throw-
including the missiles and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, you throw in the weaponry as well, and that's
No, that's a couple $1 million per missile.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I was
then
like-
whatever they're paying for, 50 caliber rounds, and
It's not cheap.
then none of this is cheap. No, yeah, I bet $100 million would have been.
Yeah.
Plus paying the team, plus getting the gear, plus getting the
private jet for
private jet to
for Nick Cage to get across the country. Oh, this isn't a training exercise. No, we called you at midnight, dude. What are you like? That character, I just cannot. I can't do it. Everything else about this movie is
Okay,
fantastic.
There's another thing. So there are a lot of things. Okay. Again, I want to be clear because I know this is all going to sound contradictory. This is one of my favorite action movies.
Oh, I love this movie so much.
It is absolutely one of the top action movies, certainly of the 90s, if not of the last 20 or 30 years. Well, 30 now. But there are so many things in the movie that are bonkers.
Oh, yes.
There's a minecart adventure under Alcatraz prison for some reason.
Yep.
I don't know why. I don't know why there's mine carts under there. I don't know why
I
there's
want
like a
that to
broken
be-
railway.
Didn't Nick Cage ask Sean Connery, what does this do? I don't know.
Yeah. There's there's like a video game style like fireball obstacle course that he has to get through to get in.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why anything would have that.
Sean.
It's not like a boiler. Like a boiler has like a pilot light. It doesn't have.
This is a Michael Bay pilot light.
When the trolley crashes, it first of all, friction means nothing in this universe.
There is no coefficient of friction.
A like, I don't know, what do we call it? 20-ton trolley just slides down the street for 3 or 4 blocks.
Before it gets blown 10 feet,
Straight
20
up.
feet.
Maybe 20, 30 feet up in the air.
Straight up in the air.
By what? I have no idea.
An explosion.
Utter mystery. I mean, all of those things, like, they're so dumb, but they're also what make this
Kind of awesome.
Bayhem and awesome. And
Yeah.
I mean, but also, I mean, even down to like the sarin gas, it has completely different effects, different parts of the movie. Like when we first are introduced to the sarin gas, it literally melts a face.
Oh,
when we see it,
it's not sarin gas. That
it's VX gas.
It's VX.
You're right. You're
Yeah.
right. It was like a sarin derivative or something. I don't know.
it was like accidentally discovered.
Whatever.
VX
It
for
doesn't-
very extreme.
Very extreme.
Very extreme.
So it melts a face, and then when Nicolas Cage is literally jamming it into a guy's mouth, he just jabs his heart with the thing, and he's pretty much fine.
He's fine.
It's not a big deal.
That's
The
not,
other guy,
That's not
not
what
fine.
atropine does, though.
No, none of that stuff does anything
No.
that it does. So it
Like
doesn't.
none of this is based in.
No, this is. You should not take any of this as good military tactics or chemical science or
No.
Besides the critique of how we treat our veterans and our
Yes.
prison policies,
yeah.
everything else.
Yeah. He could have used a trial. Mason could have used a trial probably
Yeah.
at some point. Would have been
I'm
smart.
pretty sure
That's
that
usually-
we're entitled to one.
Well, that's
if
what
we're accused
I've
of a
been
crime.
told.
Yeah.
Well, he's not
I've read about
American.
it.
He's not American, and therefore the rules don't apply.
That's why we have lines on the map.
That's why we have lights on the map. All right,
Just trying to trigger you guys right now.
You're doing a terrific job.
You know what, though, Paul? Here's what I would argue, and I have argued many times. If you're here, the rules should apply to you. If you're not here, if you're not inside the lines on the map, other rules will apply to you. So if I go to North Korea and I go, hey, man, I'm American, you got to give me a trial, and they go, no, we don't. We're North Korea. We don't have to do that. I would
Be out of luck.
I would have to give it to them and say, I'm here. I'm inside your lines. But if you're inside our lines, Bill of Rights should apply. Trial, free speech, everything. Whole deal. Right
All
to
of
privacy,
All of them.
right against
Yes.
search and seizure. Yeah. I think it
we
should
don't
be.
even get that.
Right against. Fair point, well made, sir.
Touche. But yeah, I mean, all that stuff, I do think it's weird where we go like, well, they're not an American citizen. So I'm like, so what? There are rules for ourselves and for our government, how our government treats people. Like that, just because other countries don't have the same rules, so what? Like these are our rules for how we treat humans, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Well then, human? Okay, cool.
Check.
Done. That's, soapbox. All right. Anyway. I think that's good for The Rock. Paul, would you recommend The Rock?
Oh, 100%. This was a fun movie. Nicolas Cage drove me up a wall. Also, the DC scene where he's on his rooftop with his fiance.
He has an incredible apartment.
Where the heck is that
I don't know
place?
where it is.
And with that bridge.
It's not in D.C. For those who don't know, there's like 2 bridges in D.C.
And they don't look like that.
No, they don't. They're not even very long. They're just short little bridges.
Yeah.
George Washington Parkway. There's the Highway 1.
I'm trying to even think there's even a train bridge that looks like that, and I don't think so.
No, there's just like a truss that goes across it from like where Reagan is and stuff. Yeah. No, there's nothing. It's New York. Or, I don't know, Montreal or something. Who knows? Yeah. Yeah, man, I love it. I can't more highly recommend this. If you want, like, just get some popcorn, order pizza.
Great popcorn flick.
Oh, yeah.
You know, bring some buddies over. Crank the audio system. Enjoy some Michael Bay.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with all of that. This is a movie that you watch with the bros. This is a movie that I watched with the bros. Like, you go, hang out, play video games, drink beer, eat pizza, and watch this movie.
Yeah.
Because
this is it.
That's it. That's the life.
All right. So that's all the time we have for the main episode today. If you are a patron of the show and you subscribe to us on Patreon, it's patreon.com/outoframeshow. Stick around. We're going to talk about another Sean Connery classic, Dr. No. And if you're not a patron, please consider checking us out on Patreon. Also, make sure that you watch Out of Frame on YouTube and check out our new Instagram and Twitter accounts as well. We're still trying to grow some audiences there. We still love you, even if you're not supporting the show through Patreon and whatnot. But that's it for us for right now, and we will see you next time.